Hi everyone, Mark Anton Audio here. So when you're new to mixing, you will frequently be told to mix with your ears, not with your eyes. Everyone that tells you this is completely correct. However, when you're new to mixing and you're new to working with audio in a more critical way, it's very difficult to actually understand what you're listening for. You might just think a kick drum is a kick drum, it just sounds like it is. When in fact, every sound is made up of several separate components which then come together to create the one sound that we know. So when we're mixing, we actually need to learn to listen critically. And what we're going to do as a tutorial for that is all you need is to open up a sound. I've got a kick drum sound, and you need any EQ that has a visual indicator on it. So here's my EQ. This comes with Reaper. It's free. It's called RIA EQ. And basically all we need is this EQ and its analyzer. Okay, so let's look at this analysis here. What can we see? We can see that there is some low-end information going on up here, so between 50 Hz and 100 Hz. There is some peaks going on around 1 kHz as well. And there's actually quite a lot of high-end information up here around 5 kHz and even all the way up to 10 kHz. So what we're going to do is, with our EQ, is we're going to set our first and last bands to be high pass and low pass filters. So any EQ should be able to do this, or any decent EQ. So a high pass and a low pass. And now what we're going to do is we're going to use these high pass and low pass filters to zero in on each of these frequencies that we saw earlier. So let's start with the low end here. So as you can see, this little visual indicator here has two lines. There's the original line, which is slightly greyed out, and then there's the more bold line, which is the post-EQ curve. Right, so depending on what you're listening on, if you've got a pair of cheap headphones on, or a set of cheap speakers, you probably can't hear very much. But the rest of us, we can hear a very low-end thud. It almost doesn't sound like a tone as such as it just is a sensation. Let's pull this even further. So when people talk about low-end thud in a kick drum, that's the specific frequencies they're talking about, usually between about 50 Hz and 80 Hz, depending on how your particular kick drum is tuned. To make this stand out even more, I'm going to grab another EQ, and here I'm going to set this to band pass. It's already defaulted to band pass. I'm going to put up a little bump here. So now we can really hear that thump of the kick drum. But that's not the whole story. That's just one part of our kick drum. So let's pull this down and let's move up a few hundred hertz. So let's start zeroing in, let's say, on this area here. Okay, so you should notice that most of the low-end thump is gone. I'll bring it back in quickly so you can hear it. Okay, so we've taken out that low-end thump. Now we can hear a bit more of the actual physical drum itself. It's no longer just a big sensation. It's you can start to hear the physical characteristics of the drum. So in there's almost like a pop sound, which will be like the beater of the kick hitting the skin. And you can almost hear the skin moving. Okay, so let's move up a bit further. So now you can really hear the plastic of the skin of the kick. And as we boost up here around 3 kHz, you can really hear where the definition of the kick drum comes in. So I'm just going to bypass this entire effects plugin just quickly. You can hear that's the thing that gives this whole thing definition. So if we go all the way back, so we've got our low end thump, but it lacks the definition. Hear that definition come back in? Okay, let's move a little bit further up. So now we're in sort of high end territory. And you might think, hey, it's a kick drum, it's a low sounding instrument, and well, you're technically correct. There's also tons of high end information going on. And again, this is where the definition and the clarity of the instrument starts to come through. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to bypass the entire effect, and what I want you to do is try and focus your ears just on the subsection, then just on this mid-range section, and then just on this high-end section. So let's do one after the other. So let's start with the sub, try and focus on the sub. Okay, now try listen up here. Now try and focus on the high end. Sub. Sort of body and mid-range, or low mid-range. And now we start to get the tone and the clarity. So that's really interesting. So it's like a kick drum is made of these different components, and when you're mixing, there's no how do you mix a kick drum. That's a question that doesn't have a real answer. What you want to be doing when you're mixing your kick drum is listening to all those components that make up the whole of the kick drum and say, which parts of that do you want to hear more of? Do you want to hear more of the sub? Do you want to hear less of the high-end definition? Do you want to hear more of the high-end definition? That's when you can start to make smart, educated decisions with your EQing that you use your ears to do. But using this as a visual indicator to learn how to do that is super useful. So what we're going to do now is exactly the same process, but we're just going to do it with a snare drum instead. So if we look on our chart here, it's around here-ish. We're getting the fundamental, which is the sort of the lowest frequency that our instrument creates. Let's have a listen to that. So you can hear there's like a real, like a ring, like a hum, hum. That's our sort of fundamental tone. And what you can do is if you look at the analyzer, watch as the analyzer drips down in time with the music. That decay that we're hearing should be visually noticeable on the analyzer. So listen for that ring. Okay, so let's move up frequencies. Okay, here we're getting more of we're starting to get a bit more of the snare itself, the rasp underneath the snare, which gives it a sound. And we're starting to get some resonances that are multiples of our original fundamental. Again, we can visually see them over here. Let's move up. Now we're getting lots of the sizzle of the snare. Gives it lots of definition and clarity. And loads of high end, lots of sizzle. So again, this is where the definition in our snare comes through. So again, I'm going to turn everything off and try and listen for the low ends, the body, and then the sizzle. See how much is going on there in the snare drum? It's just a single drum, but there's loads of harmonic content that together pulls together to create a snare drum. So when you're EQing and you don't know what you're EQing for, do this process. Have a listen to each part of the sound individually and say, do I want more of this bit or less of this bit? And that's when you can start cutting things you don't like and boosting things you do like. So feel free to repeat this process with any instrument you can think of, be it acoustic instruments, like guitars, vocals, pianos, electric guitars, whatever you want. Try and really figure out what the different parts of a sound are. Use the visual guides that we have available to us in this wonderful digital age that we all live in. Use these visual guides to help you make better decisions with your ears. Anyway, I hope you find this useful, and my name's been Mark Hanson Audio. Adios.